Chapter 16. Mason. Mason woke stiff and sore the next morning. It took him a second to remember why, but once he opened his eyes and realized he was on his couch and not in his bed, it came crashing back. The pain registered then, along with a gnawing hunger in his belly. Though much of the day before remained a blur, he was fairly certain he hadn't eaten since before the game. Reaching for the crutches, he took a steadying breath and then pulled himself up to a standing position. The room swam, and he closed his eyes tightly until it subsided. When it stilled, he began the slow, hobbling walk to the kitchen. He was certainly glad he was a minimalist and nothing lay on the floor for him to maneuver around, because the crutches were awkward enough as it was. He wasn't used to having to depend on anything other than his own 2 feet. Coffee was the first thing on his agenda, but he hadn't realized how much harder it would be to make with basically only one free hand. He was forced to lean one crutch against the bar and practically hop around with the other in order to take the grounds to the coffee pot. He was doubly thankful that his coffee pot was next to his sink, when he realized hopping around with a glass pot filled with water would be dangerous and disastrous. How was he going to do simple things by himself if making coffee was so hard? Knock, knock. The sound of Clara's voice jolted him so much that he almost spilled the water anyway. How did she get in? He was certain he hadn't given her a key. "Hope I didn't startle you," she said as she appeared in the kitchen. The front door was still unlocked. Yes, he'd never locked the door after she left. To be fair, he had been exhausted and in too much pain, but it was a good thing he lived in a safe neighborhood. "Do you need help?" Her face folded in concern as she took in his precarious stance and only one crutch. Within seconds, she was by his side, handing him the other crutch and taking the coffee pot from him. "Why don't you go sit down and I'll take care of this?" He wanted to object, to tell her that he could do it himself, but the truth was that he couldn't. Well, perhaps he could, but it would have taken twice as long, and his ankle was already throbbing. "Thank you." "Of course. I didn't even think about how hard it might be to get around in the kitchen with 2 crutches. I'll look today to see if they have one of those scooters you can place your knee on. At least then you'll have the use of both arms for things like this." She poured the water into the machine and pressed the button. After a few grunting and grinding noises, the soft sounds of coffee dripping into the pot filled the air. "Have you eaten?" she asked, barely missing a beat. "No." He eased himself down into a chair at the table and sighed. "I was going to have cereal after I got the coffee started, but I realized that would be hard to do as well." "Cereal?" Her nose wrinkled as if he'd just said something offensive. "You can't just have cereal. How about I make you an omelet or some eggs and bacon instead?" Before he had a chance to say anything, she was opening the fridge and rummaging around. He chuckled at her take-charge attitude. She might have changed a little since they had dated, but this personality trait definitely hadn't faded. If anything, it might even be more pronounced. But somehow he didn't mind her taking care of him. He hated not being able to take care of himself, but having Clara around definitely wasn't the worst thing in the world. "Okay, if you want. I certainly won't turn down a hot breakfast." "Good." Without missing a beat, she found a pan and started the bacon. Though she had only been here once before, she looked completely at ease in his kitchen. As the bacon sizzled, she rummaged in the cabinets for mugs, pulling 2 down and filling one with coffee for him and the other for herself. She added milk to her coffee, and then, without asking, she emptied 2 packets of sugar in his coffee, just the way he liked it, before setting it down in front of him. He stared up at her. "You remembered." She hadn't made coffee for him in years, but she hadn't forgotten the way he liked it. Her face flushed and she shrugged. It's an easy order to remember. While that was true, the color on her face suggested there was more than that behind it. He bit back his smile and sipped the warm liquid. Could they try dating again? He still wasn't sure exactly why they had split up in the first place. But he was starting to wonder if it mattered anymore. She claimed she didn't want to hold him back, but that had made no sense to him at the time. She could never do that. And while there had to be a reason, he was no longer sure the reason was as important as he'd always made it out to be. He watched her bustle around his kitchen and realized he wanted to try again. He'd been lonelier than he'd known, and having someone take care of him pointed a spotlight on that feeling. "You mind if I join you?" she asked as she placed 2 plates on the table and handed him a fork. "I wanted to check on you first thing, so I kind of skipped breakfast." Were you worried about me?" "A little," Clara said with a shrug. "You were pretty quiet yesterday." "Yeah, it was a rough day. I thought about what you said, though, about looking for the bright side, and I want you to know that I'm trying." Her eyes shifted from his and down to her plate. "How about we pray and eat this before it gets cold?" After praying, they ate in silence, each lost in their own worlds. When they were both finished, she cleared the plates and placed them in the sink. "I have to run into work for a bit, but I don't want you to worry about these dishes. I'll wash them when I come back. Until then, I want you to relax, back on the couch. Watch some television or something. Your rehab will start in a few days, and you'll be busy enough then. You might as well take the day to rest." He smiled at her mothering tone, but didn't fight her. "Okay, but let me give you something first." A look of curiosity alighted on her face, but she followed him back to the living room. He picked up his key ring from where she had placed it last night and pulled the house key off. Then he held it out to her. "I get the feeling you'll not only be here a lot, but will need to come and go often." Shaking her head, she held up her hand and took a step back. "I can't take that, Mason. I can just ring the bell." He tilted his head forward and fixed her with a pointed look. "And wait for me to hobble over to open it? What happens if I'm asleep? Or, heaven forbid, I fall and injure myself again? I would feel better knowing you could get in if you needed to." Hesitation tightened her features, and she chewed on her bottom lip, but finally agreed. "Okay, I'll take it, but only because it makes you feel better. Now please rest. I'll be back as soon as I can with the scooter. And maybe, if you're good, I'll order pizza tonight." His lips curved in a smile at the mention of their old joke. Always an athlete, his diet rarely afforded him the luxury of pizza, at least during the season. Only on rare occasions, when he'd felt it was extra special, had he indulged. With his playing time ended for the foreseeable future, now seemed like the perfect time for the hot, cheesy goodness. "Well, I certainly won't say no to that. I'll be on my best behavior." He crossed his fingers over his chest and then held them up like he was being sworn in. She helped him get resituated on the couch and brought him a large bottle of water before promising again to return as soon as she could. When the front door closed behind her, Mason flicked on the TV, but he couldn't keep his thoughts from returning to the beautiful strawberry blonde and the promise of her return. From his bag came the buzzing sound of his phone. He reached down and fished the phone out, unsurprised to see his parents' number on the screen. They had probably been calling him since the accident yesterday. In fact, he was surprised they hadn't sent Duke over to gather information for them. "Hey, Mom, Dad," he said, putting the phone to his ear.
"Mason David Dixon, how dare you not call us to let us know you were okay?"
His mother's voice was shrill and filled with more anger than he'd ever heard in it before. Mason sighed. "Mom, I was rushed to the hospital from the stadium. I didn't have my phone. By the time I got home, it was nearly 2 a.m.
I don't care what time it is. You call your mother when you get injured on national TV. I was up half the night worried about you. I must have called you every hour on the hour, and Duke didn't seem to know what was going on either. Does that team not alert your family?
I'm sure they would have had it been more serious, Mason began, but his mother cut him off before he could finish.
And how serious is it?
It's a partial tear in my Achilles tendon, Mom. Mason rubbed his hand across his forehead. He loved his mother, but sometimes she was so overbearing. They put on an ankle cast, and the doctor said it will take 4 to 8 weeks to recover.
4 to 8 weeks? I'm coming to help.
Mason's head shot up. The thought of his mother crowding in his space for 2 months was not only terrifying, but it was not happening. No, Mom, I'm fine. I've got Duke close by, and Clara is checking in on me.
Clara? Your ex-girlfriend, Clara?
The tone in her voice had shifted, but he wasn't exactly sure what the new tone was. Disbelief? Condescension? She's an athletic trainer for the team, Mom. She was with me at the hospital yesterday, and she'll be checking in on me until I'm cleared to play again.
Can't you get someone else?
His mother asked, and he thought he could finally place the tone. Distrust? He supposed that was natural since Clara had broken his heart. No, I can't get someone else, Mother. That's not how it works in pro football. She's the trainer assigned to me, and I can't just tell them I don't want to work with her. Besides, he did want to work with her. If he had just listened to her, he might not be in this situation.
Promise me you'll be careful then, Mason. You know what happened last time with her.
Except that was the problem. He didn't know what happened last time. Not really. But he was determined to find out.